You are not so great, Britain.
Chapter 6 Tracking Hell. Hello, my name is Tomasz Oryński, and you're listening to the next episode of You're Not So Great Britain. Elisa is not with us today, but I got a special guest. His name is Matt Ireland, and he's an experienced driver that drove everywhere in Europe. He's also a co-host of the podcast Truck and Driver, and he also wrote some books. Maybe you can tell us about that, Matt.
Oh yeah. So as Thomas says, my name's Matt. I've been driving in Europe and around the UK for over 20 years now, and I've so far written one book called You Call We Haul: The Life and Times of Bob Carter, which just chronicles a very good friend of mine's life story in transport, who started out in the UK and progressed on to Middle East haulage, and then back into the UK market. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but that's his life story.
Yeah, that must be a fascinating read. I actually read some of those Middle East stories, and those were some times with drivers traveling in really dire conditions. And back then, it was a true adventure,
Absolutely.
not how it is right now. But you traveled a bit off the beaten track yourself as well. I think you've been to Kazakhstan, if I remember correctly.
I've not done Kazakhstan. I've done quite a lot to Russia and
Mhm.
Ukraine. Never did quite get to Kazakhstan, but I'm currently sat in Braintree, and I'm attending a reunion that I've organised. This is the second one for a bunch of guys who used to work for Kepsto Freight, and they all used to travel mostly to it's Russia, Kazakhstan, bit of Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, all the Russian satellite countries. So they've done some proper ultra distance again through really bad climate, weather, corruption, everything thrown against them. So they've got some interesting tales themselves.
Yeah, it can be fascinating. I once met a guy who traveled to South Korea
Cool.
overland because he had some dangerous goods that they wanted to limit as much as possible, taking them on the ship.
Mhm.
So he traveled all the way, I think, to Vladivostok and then took the ferry from there.
Wow.
So it was some amazing adventure, I guess. But I'm not that well traveled. Like lorry wise, I've only mostly traveled in Scotland, and now I moved to Finland. I'm starting around here. But when I was younger, I traveled a lot as a hitchhiker. So obviously, you were traveling a lot with the drivers. You were seeing how they live, how they work. You were listening to the stories. And you know what? First time when I arrived to Britain, I've noticed something I never seen before, which was those plastic bottles of a yellow liquid lying in the ditches. You know, when you are standing in the levee with your thumb up trying to hitchhike, and there were all these yellow bottles everywhere. Do you know what they are?
I think they're called Truckatizer, I believe.
So it's not Iron Brew then.
I don't think only in Scotland it's Iron Brew. It's a real litter is a real bugbear of mine. I cannot stand it, and why people can't use bins is quite beyond me. And it also irks me an awful lot for a lot of British people just to blame foreign drivers for doing this, when there's more than enough homegrown British guys who can't be bothered to throw anything into a bin.
We had a chapter of the podcast about that as well.
Yeah, it just the one thing I think is very ironic that the people who seem to drink Red Bull can't manage the energy to actually throw a can in the bin. Uh,
Maybe they think it will fly on
yes,
itself.
yeah, exactly. So, it's not a pretty sight at all anywhere, and it does seem quite acute in the UK compared with a lot of other places. Now, whether that's because it gets cleared up more in Europe or whether it's just happens a lot more in the UK, I'm not 100% sure.
I think we can refer to our previous podcast. I think it's a lot of cultural thing. Like when I was growing up in Poland, or when my co-host was growing up in Italy, it was thrown upon you when you were a kid and you were littering. And here, I actually stopped telling people to do not throw stuff because I tell kids to do not litter, and and their parents stay in the defense, in defense of their kids littering. So I think it's a lot of cultural thing. But my question was more about, I know this is not the very nicest topic, but I was actually concerned if you can tell us what's this yellow liquid in the actual bottles, because I think that will start us on the today's topic.
Yeah, well, to not put too fine a point on it, it's piss. And it generally stems from a complete lack of facilities for drivers in the UK. Again, especially compared with pretty much everywhere in Europe. I can't really think of anywhere that's worse for drivers actually getting somewhere to stop and use a toilet. Even to the point of there's been a big campaign by Truck and Driver magazine of getting companies to actually allow drivers to use a toilet on site because they weren't allowing drivers to use facilities whatsoever. The law has changed here now, and they are supposed to, but even still, you'll quite often get somewhere to be told there's no toilet or there's a portaloo that's not seen a wash in an awful long time.
Yeah, I can imagine that. But the thing is also, I think that even when there are some toilets, like on this big motorway services area that are common in Britain, because if someone's from outside Britain is listening to us, if you drive on European motorways, you usually have some small laybys with like couple of bays for truck parking, maybe 15 parking bays for cars, and a small toilet and maybe a picnic table, and that's it. Such a thing virtually does not exist in Britain. On the motorway network, you only have this big motorway areas when you need to enter and you need to park, and very often it's not even like drive-through parking bays, but you need to actually reverse your lorry into a parking bay, providing there's enough space for you to park there. And then the truck parks are usually at the very end of the parking area, so you have to walk to this building, and then if you get to the building, the toilets are rarely next to the entrance, but you have to walk through all these shops selling tats and fast food outlets only to get to the toilet, when you will find a queue from some coach full of football fans or something waiting. And that means that you cannot just stop, pop into the toilet and be back behind the wheel in 3 minutes. No, it takes like 20-25 minutes sometimes to get an actual toilet break when you're driving a lorry. And this is another reason I think that discourages people from even driving to this motorway services areas, if they can just stop on the halt shoulder, put the hazards on, and just use the bottle basically.
Yeah, absolutely. You raise a very valid point. I mean, the UK motorway network, there is not one single rest area, or like in France they have Airs, don't they? In Germany they have the Rastplatz, which is just literally somewhere to pull over, use a toilet, or stop and have your lunch and go. There's not one single area in the UK. On the A roads, compared with the motorways, yes, there are laybys here and there, but none of them are proper big rest areas. Although, funnily enough, not far from where I am now at Braintree, up the A120, close to Stansted Airport, there is actually, either side of the road, there is like a European-style rest area with about half a dozen truck bays. They've got a cafe in there, and they've also got a toilet block. And they are pretty much the only kind that I can think of in the UK actually.
I think there is another one like that when you turn left at Scotch Corner to go for Carlisle.
Yes.
There is also this deep lay-by with small cafe and the toilets,
Yeah.
which is closed at night, so it's pretty pointless when you drive there at night, as I used to.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's only on the one side as well at Scotch Corner, isn't there? And
yes, that's true.
Yeah.
There is the motorway service area on the other side, but then you cannot get the truck there. But also there is something unique at the Scottish border. When you drive, I think it's already M6 before Gretna, between Gretna and Carlisle. When there is, if you drive southbound, there is this BP station on the left when there is absolutely no parking space whatsoever. So if you need to park in the toilet, you either have to park on the like road or or just occupy the fuel forecourt because there's no other option for you to park there and use the toilet. So this is something really that I cannot imagine even that something like that would happen in I remember once I was speaking with one of, I think, even our common friends, and he was telling me that he is going to Wrocław, which is the town I'm from in Poland, and he was like so happy about some fantastic truck stop he found nearby in the village of Kostomłoty, and I was like, "What he's talking about? There's not a truck stop in Kostomłoty," and he actually sent me a link on Google Maps, and this what he considered a fantastic truck stop is just a standard bigger gas station in Poland, which has a shower, toilet, small restaurant, and like 10 parking bays for the trucks.
Yeah,
So this shows to me how low the standards are in Britain for drivers to consider just an ordinary Eastern European gas station to be a fantastic truck stop.
absolutely. I mean, I've always enjoyed going to Poland just because the facilities are so good, and amongst other things, if like you've got the motorway services, but then if you get onto the old like national roads, as I call them, the amount of truck stops there are, and just almost every garage you can get a couple of trucks into. And you don't have, you do pay for parking occasionally, but these are in the bigger truck stops, and it's not much money, and generally you'll get a money off. Whereas in like the UK, I do day work now in the UK just because it's become so much of a problem getting parked up and getting decent facilities, not having your diesel stolen, not having your load stolen. It's costing you £35 just to park up at night, and for that you get maybe a meal voucher for, again, fast food, or some awful food that's been under a light all day and it's just inedible. And you get no security, you get nothing. If the vehicle's broken into, it's your fault. There's no comeback, there's no nothing. It's just woeful. It really is.
And that's if you're lucky to find a place to park in the motorway
Yeah,
service, because sometimes it's just too busy.
yeah.
And the other thing that is, I think, unique to Britain, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen that anywhere else, are this like shallow laybys that are basically like a bus stop.
Yeah.
There's just a bit of widening of the road, like maybe 2.5 meters wide,
Yeah.
and you are supposed to park there. And I can't imagine. I had to sleep in such a place and a couple of times, and it's impossible to have a sleep
Yeah.
because not even the lorry, every car that drives next to you causes your cab to shake. The noise is terrible, and you cannot safely get out to the right side. You have to climb over to the left.
Yeah.
And I used to drive when I was driving a lot around Britain. I used to drive DAF CF, which got this big engine bay in the cab. So it was so uncomfortable. And this is something I can't think even of a single one like that in Poland, because when there are these laybys, they are like deep. Usually it's when they upgrade the road and they straightened a bends a bit.
Yeah.
Then they leave this meandering, I would call it, a part of the road, and they make it into a parking with some like picnic tables. And now, as I've been traveling through Poland a lot recently, even those small places in the middle of nowhere, they got this portable toilets put up by the local councils, and they are emptied and cleaned regularly, and they have like toilet paper and everything in them. And it's just such a great experience compared to driving in Britain that it's just a shame. And this is from the country that is struggling to get drivers, that have this terrible driver shortage, when last year or so your prime minister was begging European drivers to come and save Christmas. But it's not only about money. You just need to show those people that you respect them, and then maybe they will come and work for you, because as you said, you are born in it's your own country, and you don't want to deal with this overnighting in the truck in Britain because of the lack of infrastructure. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And a prime example as well. So where I live in the east of England, we've got Felixstowe Port, and just to the south we've got Harwich. And so anything coming in, I mean, Felixstowe is allegedly Britain's premier port for deep sea like container shipping. anything that's coming in and going sort of towards the Midlands or the North will go down the A14. Now, we had a truck stop called the Orwell Crossing on the A14. It had been a truck stop site for as long as I can remember. An awful lot. It used to be a BP garage, and it got developed and so on. And the chap who owned it, a lovely guy called Carl, who passed away maybe 10 years ago now, he went to America, and he just sort of wanted an American-style truck stop, and he sort of modelled it on German Autohofs as well. And it's a lovely big building, clean showers and toilets, and they were cleaned regularly all the time. Real good food, loads of parking off the road. And he had so many problems with the council, like he wasn't allowed to advertise it because they didn't want people going in there, even though an awful lot of residents from Ipswich would go on a Sunday to have a carvery dinner out at this truck stop. It was very, very successful. And when he died, it slowly got ran into the ground, and it shut towards the end of last year. And it's now being developed into a logistics park. I believe it's just going to be an Amazon, and there's a large local haulier taking up part of it as well. So I can guarantee that there'll be double yellow lines with fines if you dare to stop there. So there's just even less places to stop now. So, for example, if you're leaving Felixstowe, you're going to Birmingham, which is about, let's just say, 4 hours driving, depending on where you're going in the Midlands. But if you leave Felixstowe heading westbound, you've got a small garage at Ipswich, which does have a snack van in, which is very good. There's one toilet in the garage, which is often out of order, but there's parking for maybe 20 or so trucks there. Once you're past that, you've got there's one services again just off the A14, which has room for about 12 trucks or so. No showers, a toilet. They've just renovated the whole services, but not put a shower or anything like that in. Once you get past that, you're then getting to Bury St Edmunds, where there are a couple of truck stops. And then beyond that, you've got Cambridge services. Beyond that, you've got one or two. You've got Welford truck stop. You've got Rothwell. And that's kind of it until you hit the Midlands. And this is in like a 3-hour section. You've kind of got 4 or 5 places to stop other than lay-by. So you've got hundreds of trucks leaving Felixstowe and Harwich on a daily basis, back and forth, going to the Midlands and the North, and you've got space to park, let's just say 100 of them, and that's it.
Yeah, and this is not the only region, because I traveled a lot in my British times over A1, and then it was upgraded to A1M. Now it's a proper motorway, and there used to be plenty of those lay-bys, some of them good deep ones, like the European styles, and they are now all gone. And all this stretch, I think it got only one new services, which is like Moto Wetherby. And that's it. There's no new facilities. Well, there is one new one in Limingby as well, I think. But then there used to be this Londonderry truck stop, which is now gone. So that's evinced up. And now I hear the Lockerbie truck stop is going to be shut as well. So as you say, it's not improving. On the other hand, it's just getting worse. And the other thing is that those who stay in business, they are running such a captive business that your friend from this truck stop that tried to do it good was actually an exception. I remember a couple of years back, I was traveling with my girlfriend, and we were really struggling to find a place to stop, because as you drive from Dover, from the ferry, there's like a very big traffic, and first this motorway to Dover was all busy because of Brexit. Like there was trucks parked everywhere in, I think, Maidstone services. So we left there. Then there's almost nothing on the bypass. There's nothing on M11. You go A14, and we hoped for Peterborough services, but then there was some truck fest in there, so there was like no chance getting in. And then I told to her, listen, there used to be this old style truck stop someone recommended to me as a great thing 10 years ago, and I once stopped there and I told never again. But that was like 10 years ago. It has to be better by now. So we went there, and actually I name and shame them. It was like Stibbington Inn, I think.
Stibbington Diner.
Yeah. And it was disgusting. I don't think they cleaned the tables since I was there last time. It's just basically a yard full of dusty potholes. and this cafe that haven't been improved for like 40 years, especially showers. My girlfriend gave up. She was just too disgusted to use showers there.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, the ladies' showers are in a better condition than the men's showers because obviously there's much less lady drivers. The food, there was like not a single healthy item on food. Even she got some toast and it was like deep fried, like dripping with oil.
Yeah.
It was just something. I just seen her face after we traveled across the Europe. We were on some road trip to Tuscany and back, and we were stopping in this German Autohofs and French routiers and everything. And then we ended in like Stibbington diner, which was like completely opposite to what you would expect in 21st century.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, I think, that there is no council provided facilities. On the contrary, as you say, council is fighting with truck parking whenever they could. There was this famous case with Kent when they were slapping tickets at truckers who were parking in random places because there were absolutely no place to park for them. And the private institutions are very far from each other, and even though you could think they have this heritage market, but they have so much problems with the council, so much problems with some local NIMBYs, that I guess this business is really hard to run a truck stop in Britain. So tell me, if you know, why there is no like council run motorway services area, why they're all run by the private companies?
Yeah, the council used to have an obligation, and an awful lot of most councils many years ago, most areas would have a cattle market, and these would often double up as truck stops at night, and they're getting fewer and fewer and fewer. Newark was it's now I think even that has gone potentially, and it's being redeveloped. But I think the parking has moved. But again, it's been a while since I've been up there. But the problem is, it's the same with everything in the UK. It's because it's being privatised. The council has nothing to do with it. We'll give that to a private company. They can make money out of it because that's all it comes down to is making money, and they're not interested in it. And so they just wash their hands of it and say, well, it's not our responsibility. It's this company over here. You have to speak to them. And because they're a private company, they can do as they please. And there's no comeback. And it's so frustrating. My idea would be almost every large town in the UK has a park and ride system for people going into town every day. And at night, these parks are all empty. So why not employ somebody to keep an eye on them? And you could park some trucks in there because they all have toilets. Yeah, they might not have showers, but there's toilets in these places for the buses and the drivers and the passengers. So you could park trucks in there overnight and charge a fee that would cover the cleaning and the security of whoever's in charge there. And just tell the drivers, look, you can park from say 6 p.m, but you have to be gone by 6 a.m. because it then becomes a car park again. And
yeah, and they can even take the bus or the tram to the town to go to restaurants or something. I remember vaguely, I think it was well over a decade ago, but I used to park, I think it was in Plymouth, on the bus stop in the city center.
Right.
There was this very system that at night you were allowed to park your truck on the bus stop in the middle of the town, and it was brilliant because you can go to the pub, you can go to do some shopping in the local Tesco and everything.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years, I came back to there, and it was no longer allowed. So yeah, this is another example of how trucking facilities are disappearing. And when we come to the private companies, we have to remember, if you build some motorway side business, then a truck is not a good business for you because it takes a lot of parking space. It will probably stay there for 11 hours, and the driver maybe will buy one meal, go to the shower, and that's it. While on the same space, you can park like 6 cars with family of 4 in every of those cars, and they will go to McDonald's and they will buy some shit for the children, and they will maybe buy a cover for the mobile, and they may play one of those games, arcades, and spend time in there. So for those businesses, the truck driver is the worst kind of customer because they take a lot of infrastructure and they don't spend much money. So
True, but they are also customers that are there all year round.
well, that's true too. They are not doing occasional trips. That's a good point.
Yeah.
but yet I don't see that the motorway services area in Britain really try to cater for truck
No, they're
drivers.
not interested. Not at all.
See, I stopped recently in a not a truck stop, the motorway service area here in Finland during one of my first days at work. It was somewhere near Hämeenlinna, and was this very classic, like the over bridge over the motorway.
Yeah.
And everything there was like total opposite to what I was used to from Britain. So the truck parking was drive-through bays, and they were very close to the entrance. And as soon as you enter from both sides, because I went to check, first thing you got a little shop with the tills for paying for fuel and the toilets right next to the entrance, so you don't have to go there.
Yeah.
And then as you go deeper over this bridge, you got some like cafes, and there's really, it was like tiny compared to your average British motorway service area, but you still had like Hesburger, which is like the local variation of McDonald's, and Subway, and Burger King, and some local food, and like a posh cafe with some fancy coffees and cakes, and like an ordinary food eatery with local cuisine. And what I also liked about it, that they were all around this big space when there were tables for everyone to sit together. So if we are together and you want to eat in Burger King and I want to eat a posh coffee with a croissant, we can go to two ends of this room and then sit together at the same table, which is also brilliant. And then there was a small library, or maybe like a book swap place. And then on the other side, there were, of course, showers and some shop. And then there was like a big, well-stocked supermarket that if you're a truck driver, you can buy everything there. Not only like motoring stuff, but like household items like dishwasher liquid, some like small plastic bowls, whatever you may need on the road. And this was really tiny enterprise compared to what I'm used from Britain. But it was like totally opposite. You could see like everything is designed in a way that it will make the customer served easy and convenient, not like force them to walk through all the shops to get to the toilets in hope he will buy something on the way. And I think it's a big sign of a different attitude as well between those two countries.
Yes, yeah. The attitude of England is try and get as much money out of their pockets as you can before they actually go to the toilet, regardless. So, and it has the opposite effect on me. I just don't want to see any of it. And quite often, if I do stop somewhere like that, then I'll usually go to the garage instead, because you've got to walk through less rubbish to get to the toilet.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But also sometimes it's a complete absurd. Like, for example, Annandale Water, I think the first services as you go into Scotland after Gretna, there's this truck parking, which is like far away from the main building.
Mm-hmm.
And you can park your truck, and there's a sign, and it literally says on the same sign, there is no pedestrian access to the main building. Please pay for your parking in the main building.
Yeah.
So how am I supposed to get there?
Yeah.
They don't explain. So this shows how terrible it is. And of course, to park, you need to reverse in because there are no drive-through bays. You just need to reverse as you.
Yeah.
And that's also must be a terrible cost, because I only recently upgraded to class 1, and for me it was a struggle to reverse on blind side into this narrow, dark, truck bay.
Yeah.
in some motorway service. So I guess there must be a plenty of young inexperienced drivers that hit other trucks or damage their own trucks with this like really high concrete curbs that they are usually around these truck parking spaces. So I just don't understand. So tell me, what can be done to improve the situation?
Yeah. Like I say, I think the park and ride being utilised as one potential way of helping it, but I think there should just be more pressure put on local councils to have to provide services for trucks because they need them. There's no two ways about it. Every single town in Britain is served by trucks, whether they like it or not. So they might as well start liking it and realising that they have to. There's no way around it. The problem, again, it's just the money from the budget to actually try and build somewhere where, like you say, you park a truck up, you might get the guy or lady to have one meal out of them, and that's it, whereas 4 or 5 cars will provide much more revenue. So they just need to stop thinking about it being revenue and provide an actual service for essential workers. When COVID was on, we were key workers and people were clapping us just for doing our job, and now we're back to being the scum of the earth again. So we need people just to remember back to when they were locked up inside and we were carrying on regardless. And again, there's a commercial at the moment on TV by McDonald's with all these cheerful truck drivers taking their god awful McDonald's food home to their families, and I'm not a fan of McDonald's at all. But yeah, in the pandemic, they wouldn't serve truck drivers because it was a drive-through, and you can't take a truck through, so you can't walk in and you can't get any food. But they seem to have forgotten that straight away, ironically, now have truck drivers on their adverts.
Yeah, and also when it comes to pandemics, I drove in Scottish Highlands and there were virtually no toilets open at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, like from Glasgow to Isle of Skye, there was one toilet in this BP garage in Fort William that you were allowed to use. That was the only one possible to use. So, yeah, they keep forgetting. But I think if I may like chip my advice to Britain how to better things, I recently even watched some clips on YouTube about like secrets of the motorways. It was called, I think, and it turns out that there's plenty of like land reserves along the motorways. There even are some ghost sleep roads leading to nowhere because there were plans to build a motorway service areas and they were never built.
Mm-hmm.
So what if government, if they want to keep this franchise system when the private companies provide the system, what if they give those companies a discount, but they would say, okay, Moto or Welcome Break or whoever, you can have this land for half price, but your motorway service area has to be much more catered to truck drivers, and just set some border conditions and demand that from them. Maybe that would be an option as well.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt. I'm sure they'd find a way around it with their lawyers and get around it, of course. But it's certainly worth a try. But I think it just needs a whole cultural change in attitude. I think that's what a lot of it is. And
we have to remember that truckers are for life, not just for Christmas.
Yeah, not just for COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think sadly it's probably never going to change. I think it's just going to get worse and I don't think it'll ever get better. I think we'll just have to struggle on, hoping for the best, I guess.
Well, yeah, let's hope that the country can do better, because I hear there are some other problems now with the country, and the truckers may not be the first priority for everyone. But we have to remember everything comes on trucks, especially in Britain when the rail system is less used for freight than in other countries.
Yep.
So trucks are like a lifeline for the economy, and you need to take care of the trucks. And to do that, you need to respect drivers. And until you do that, I think no matter how much money you would try to throw at them, you will still struggle to get
Absolutely
people wanting to get into the business.
Yep, 100%.
Okay, so I think this gives people some insight into the trucking world of the Great Britain, and we spoke about what can be improved, and let's hope some of those improvements will be returned, especially the things you mentioned, like this cattle markets or the park and ride, that can be done at very little costs. It's only about the political decisions. So I hope that can be implemented pretty sure and improve the situation vastly. But maybe we will come back to that in a few years and see what happened. Meanwhile, thank you for coming on our podcast. I guess it may be risky for a British person to come to the podcast that is telling bad things about Britain, but I and Elisa, who is usually running this podcast with me, we believe that Britain is a fantastic country, but it has some problems. But to fix your problems, you have to first admit it. And the aim of this podcast is to open people's eyes, because usually when you sit inside, you don't see that until you step out and get a different perspective. So this is the aim of our podcast, and you can listen to the previous chapters, one of which was about the littering problem, and there will be future chapters as well. But just before you go, tell me where people can find you if they want to follow you or get your book or maybe your podcast.
So I've got a YouTube channel. So if you search for Suffolk Matt Island, that's with one T, you'll find me on there. I'm knocking about on Facebook as well. And I've got a truck photo page on there if you're an anorak like myself. And my book you can find if you search for Old Pond, and you should be able to find on their website, because there is a rather large multinational distributor whose name I don't want to mention because I really don't like them. And the current publisher just advertises through there. So I would suggest trying to find a copy through oldpond.co.uk. But
Yeah, always support the small guys.
yeah,
Especially that you can get a better deal, which I just learned as I needed a tablet with SatNav for my truck as I moved to a new country. And instead of going to any of the big players, I went to my old friend from scouting who has a small computer shop in Poland, and he got me a great tablet at a better price than any of the main street retailers. So it's not a sacrifice if you are going to help out the small guys. It's actually better for everyone.
absolutely.
So I will encourage you to do that as well. So we will throw the links to your social media into the description of this podcast. Thank you again for coming, and I wish you and to all of our listeners all the best in the new year. And let's hope Britain will be better next year and every year after.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Tom.